Today I have Pamela Whitehead, and she is the program coordinator and client manager for ProLove, and it's the website is prolove.com. But before Pamela has a very interesting story about her life. And so, Pamela, if you would, thank you very much for being here, first of all.
Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Sure. So my name is Pamela Whitehead, and I'm the projects manager for And Then There Were None Pro-Life Outreach. My story started out pretty tragic from birth or conception, actually. My mother was 15 years old when she got pregnant with me, and she met my father in prison while she was visiting her father in prison. And so there was generations of, issues already before I was even conceived. And so when my grandfather got out of prison, he came home to Mississippi, and he brought my father, who got out pretty close after, like a son. And within a few months, my mother was pregnant with me. That year was 1973, and abortion had become legal. And my mother and father went to my grandfather and my grandmother and said, we're pregnant, but we've decided to have an abortion. And my grandmother went along with it. My grandfather said, absolutely not. He said, there will be no abortion. And he said, you can live with me and I'll help you raise this child, or you can get married. And they decided to get married. And so my mother was 16 years old when I was born in August of 1973. And she was 16. Within the next 8 years, they had 4 children. And so it was a very violent upbringing. My father was an alcoholic. Again, he had, as a juvenile and up to his early adulthood, he had spent time in prison for aggravated assault. And, he had an alcohol problem, and he beat my mother regularly. And on August the 25th, 1981, he beat her to death. And so she died, and he went to prison for murder. And we were left orphans. There were 4 children. I was 8 years old. And the CPS, I think at the time it was called Pensions and Security in Alabama. I grew up in Alabama, Roll Tide. And they took us, and they contacted all kinds of family members to try to take us in. Right. And no one, our family was very poor, lived in a very, just didn't have a lot of money. A lot of laborers. No one actually graduated high school. My father had an 8th grade education. And so no one was really educated. They worked blue collar jobs, and no one could take all 4 of us in at once. And they didn't want to separate the children. And there was a family who came in and said they would take all of us. And so everybody, that seemed like the best idea. And so this family took all 4 of us in, and they already had 7 children of their own. So we went into this very large family. And within 2 weeks of arriving in that home, I was physically abused. I got beat one day for something and that had never happened to me, as much as my father had been violent and, laid hands on my mother and beat her all the time. He never raised a hand to us. Right. I may have had a couple of spankings in my life. I probably needed more, but I didn't get them, And so this was foreign to me. I didn't understand what was happening. Right. And this man sat me down on the front porch, and he looked at me in my face, and he said, if you don't want to go back to where you came from, then you need to know that you're responsible for those kids. And that was the moment that I grew up. Right. Within the next couple of years, he began sexually abusing me along with his 3 sons. And that's when I turned to alcohol. He would give me alcohol as
you were 11.
Yes, ma'am. I was 11.
11.
And the first time that I remember drinking is when I was 11. And I remember the moment that I drank that liquor, and it was bourbon. The moment that I drank it, the warmth that I felt, and the feeling afterwards was, it didn't matter what was happening to me. I didn't have to remember it.
Right.
And I didn't have to be responsible for it. And that was the catalyst for liquor being my medication for years and years following this abuse. So when I graduated high school, I ran away from that home, and I actually turned my foster father in to the police, and he went to prison for the abuse that we suffered. Right. But my prison had just started. You know, like it's as if I had just been convicted and arrested and put in prison. Right. I was left to my own to start making decisions, and I had no idea how to do that. And I joined the military instead of going to college, and because I needed money, and I needed to be able to live at the same time and get an education. And the Army was really good to me, but I wasn't really good to the Army. I learned how to drink really well, and I again put myself in many compromising positions, and I ended up sexually assaulted a couple of times while I was in the military as well. Not that I blame myself for that, but there are things that I could have done to prevent those situations. And I started using drugs. I was using marijuana. I was using cocaine. Once I discharged from the Army, I began using methamphetamines. And
you're just self-medicating.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had no coping skills. Right. And I had no one. You know, I was an orphan. I was a wanderer, really. I had some of my biological family that had come back into my life, but, you know, I wouldn't be honest with them. Right. I was pretty self-righteous and prideful and just selfish, really. And I manipulated everybody who was around me to get what I wanted or what I needed. Wanted them to think that I was a good person. And, but inside I felt like I was evil. Right. And, in 2001, I found myself in an unplanned pregnancy. I had already had 2 children. I had a son from a marriage that I surrendered my rights to because I was an alcoholic and I couldn't care for him. And once he and his father, once we got divorced, I surrendered those rights, and his wife adopted him. So he has a beautiful family, and his wife is a wonderful person, and I'm just grateful for that. But my current husband and I got pregnant when I was 24, and I had a daughter, and I stayed sober the whole time I was pregnant. And even after she was born, I was nursing, I was breastfeeding, and I stayed sober throughout that time. And then she was about 10 or 11 months old, and she stopped nursing, and immediately I went right back to drinking and doing cocaine. And I picked up right where I left off. You know, it was as if I had no reason really to stay sober anymore, because I was doing it for someone else and not for myself. I didn't really care that much about me. And my child's father and I, who's now my current husband, but we weren't married at the time. We split up for about 3 or 4 years. And during that time, I was with someone else, many people. I'd begun to basically prostitute myself for drugs. There was no real exchange of money, but there was always an exchange of goods.
Drugs.
Yeah. And I ended up pregnant. And I thought I knew who the father of the child was, but I wasn't quite sure. And I just knew I wasn't in a position to carry this pregnancy. And I made a decision to have an abortion. And so I went to the abortion clinic. It was West Alabama Reproductive Services in Tuscaloosa. My father, who had killed my mother, had just gotten out of prison in August of 2001. And I was trying to have a relationship with my father. I thought I'd forgiven him. And I
Right.
thought the right thing to do would be to try to help him. You know, he'd been in prison for over 20 years. And so I
Right.
thought I should try to help him, you know, as a daughter. That's the right thing to do. Here I was, an addict and an alcoholic, but I'm going to help him, you know. And, you know, he comes out of prison to this daughter who's pregnant and addicted. And he accompanied me to the abortion clinic. The abortion did not go well. I was almost 14 weeks pregnant, and the physician perforated my uterus. And so once the procedure was over, it only took a few minutes. They put me into recovery, and there was a couple other girls in there, and they were very comfortable, very, it's thundering here. I'm so sorry.
That's fine.
They were very comfortable, and they were calm, almost relaxed to the point of sleep. And I wasn't. There was this, something wasn't right in my body. And so I got up and I went to go to the bathroom, and it's like I felt something pop in my belly, and blood just poured out of me. I hemorrhaged all over the place. And I don't know if you've ever pulled the cord in the restroom, but I pulled the cord. That was one of those times, and 2 nurses or techs or medical assistants came, and they said, "What did you do?" And I thought, what did I do? Y'all did this to me.
Right.
You know? So they put me on a gurney, and they rolled me into a narrow hallway with no lights on, just the hallway by the back door. And they left me there by myself. And I lay there for what seemed like forever. You know, it could have been 5 minutes. It could have been 20 minutes. I don't know, but it seemed like a lifetime.
Right.
By myself, in pain, trying to be quiet, because if I'm honest with you, in my mind, what I thought at the time was, well, what did you expect?
Right.
This is what happens. I mean, you knew what you were getting into. And I did. I was not a person who didn't know what abortion was, didn't know the development of the unborn child. Again, I'd already had 2 children.
Right.
I'd seen ultrasounds from the beginning of pregnancy. I knew this. I was a medical laboratory technologist. I had seen products of conception after miscarriage and other D&C procedures. I was not ignorant. And so naturally I condemned myself and thought this was my fault. So the ambulance finally came, and they took me to DCH Regional Hospital, which is there, Druid City in Tuscaloosa. And they took care of me there. No one there judged me when they found out why I was there, but I judged myself very harshly.
Right.
Very harshly. Once I was released from the hospital, that was September 9th, I was released, 2001. 2 days later, 9/11 happened. And this tragedy, this horrible thing that I had gone through just got dwarfed by this terrible tragedy in the world. And I literally stuffed it down and just ignored it. I acted like it didn't happen, tried to forget it. And so, you know, I may have gotten rid of my child, but I never got rid of the memory of my child. And as much as I tried to medicate myself and as hard as I tried to forget, I never could. I never could. He was due on February 25th, 2002. And I never forget that. You know, am I someone that sits around in remorse and regret and lamenting? No, but I do remember, because he was my child. And after that procedure, the physician prescribed me opiates. And that same year, I had had a meniscus repair on my knee. I had had a tonsillectomy at 28 years old. And then I had this perforated uterus. And for all 3 of those procedures, I was prescribed opiates. And so I'd already become dependent without even realizing it. And now I had this emotional trauma and PTSD from this abortion, compounded with all of the other post-traumatic stress issues I had from abuse. And these opiates became my friend.
Right.
And I started abusing them. And I mean, it wasn't long before I was just full out. And I began using methamphetamine even more. And that's what really took me to the place where I had an awakening one day. It was in April of 2004. I'd gone on a trip with some ladies, and we were at a beach condo. And I don't know about anybody else who's been an addict or an alcoholic, but I was the kind that nobody really wanted to be around once I got to a certain point. You know, at first they did.
Right.
But I wasn't very generous with my substances. I didn't like to share. And so I would get upset, you know, and I was a very rageful person. I was not very nice. I was really a bully. And, you know, there were friends in this condominium, and they were all enjoying themselves. And I usually got to the point where I didn't want to be around anybody, you know, not even myself. And I had gotten to that point. We'd been doing drugs for about 4 days, and I was just sick and tired of everybody, and even me. So I'm standing out on the balcony, and it's dark out there. I don't know what time it was. I think it was right before sunrise. So it was early wee hours of the morning, and we were still awake. And I'm standing out there, and I'm smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer, and I've just been smoking meth, and I'm looking inside the condominium, and I'm standing in the dark, and all these people were in the kitchen under like a fluorescent light, and they were laughing and having a conversation and just looking like they were enjoying themselves. And I just had these thoughts like, look at them. Who do they think they are? You know, these evil thoughts. And all of a sudden I heard a voice. And today I know that voice because I recognize it. At the time I didn't. But that voice said, this is your life. You're always on the outside looking in. Even in a room full of people, you still feel all alone. Can I tell you, I was so mad. When I heard that, it was the absolute truth, but it enraged me. You know, as prideful as I was, as self-righteous as I was, as I knew best for me, that was the absolute truth. And I stormed through that condominium and I said, I'm leaving. And if you're coming with me, let's go. Now, we were in Orange Beach, Alabama, and I lived in Montgomery. I booked it from Orange Beach to Montgomery. And by the time I got there, it was daylight. And I was going to get dressed and go to work. I mean, those of you who've been in my position, y'all know you think you're fine. Right. You're just going to carry on. And I'd done it many times before. And I functioned how I functioned. I don't know. It was only the grace of God. But I went. Now, I had put my daughter in the care of someone else that I trusted. And I went to get my daughter and take her to where she needed to go. And she looked at me like I was a monster. And that moment, something happened to me. I mean, she looked at me as if I had a disfigured face. It's almost like all of a sudden my condition was visible. Right. You know, my inward condition was visible outwardly. And what I thought about myself, everyone else could see. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because that moment, I decided, I looked at my friend, and I was in a lesbian relationship at the time. I'd been in that lesbian relationship for almost 3 years. And I looked at her and I said, take me to the hospital because I'm going to die if something doesn't change right now. And so she did. And before I got to the emergency room, she stopped by my brother's place and he prayed over me. He laid hands on me and he prayed over me. And that was April the 24th. I detoxed for 2 days. So I say my sobriety date is April 26th, 2004. I've not touched another drug or another drop of alcohol, anything stronger than an Advil since that day.
So 15 years.
Yes, ma'am. 15 years.
Very good.
Yeah. And today I'm married to my children's father. We have another daughter. She'll be 13 in October. And I work for National Pro-Life Ministry. So God has taken what was meant for evil and he's using it for good.
Right. Well, your prior life experiences has led you to the job and position you have today because you've walked that mile.
Yes, ma'am.
So tell me about the organization that you work for today, and the movie Unplanned is out, and it's about Miss Abby.
Yes, ma'am.
And if you would tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. So Unplanned, it came out in theaters in March. So it's a major motion picture. It's written and directed by the same men who did God's Not Dead. And one of the directors did I Can Only Imagine. So it's a really well done film, but the story is what makes it what it is. It's compelling and it's true. So Abby Johnson was a fiery young woman. She was at Texas A&M University when she went to a job fair one day. And at that job fair, Planned Parenthood had a table. And the table was hot pink, and it was decorated with all the, hot pink drew her.
Right.
All girls like hot pink, right? Or most of us do. And so she was drawn to the table, and she asked them some questions about what they do and what they did. And everything they talked about was women's empowerment and lifting each other up and just supporting women and being there for women. And, she was really sold on what they were doing. And so she began volunteering for Planned Parenthood in Bryan College Station in Texas. And, when she was volunteering, she started out as what's called a patient escort. And so that's someone who walks alongside a woman to get her safely into the facility and protected from what they call protesters.
Right.
And now, admittedly at the time, she says there were some people out in front of that facility who were yelling at women, screaming at women, holding up large images of aborted babies,
Right.
bloody graphic images, and saying things like, don't kill your baby, you're a baby killer, those kinds of things. All of that only strengthened her resolve to want to help these women even more. And in her mind, she admits it made the clinic look like a safe place. However, it wasn't long before there was another group of folks who started coming out onto that sidewalk. So there was this it's almost like the dueling protesters going on. And this group of people were much more peaceful, much more prayerful. And they did everything that they could to show compassion and love and be non-judgmental, but at the same time offering the truth and helpful resources to women. And she was kind of drawn to that group. She had some spats with them every once in a while, but for the most part, she was not, she felt like they were there for good reasons,
right.
And so Abby was kind of sold out on this pro-choice mission of Planned Parenthood. She was all in for abortion. She was all in for the organization and what they were doing. And she rose to the ranks of clinic director. So now she was the director of this Bryan College Station clinic, and she was their spokesperson. She was well on her way to being in upper management of the entire organization nationally. And a physician came to her facility who did a procedure that they didn't normally do in the Planned Parenthoods, and that was an ultrasound guided abortion. And she was fascinated by that because he said that this is safer for women, and her desire was to help women.
Right.
That was the initial reason why she went into this, was to help women and empower them. And so she thought, well, if this is safer, I want to be a part of that. So she had never assisted on an abortion procedure the entire time she had worked at Planned Parenthood. She had been in the products of conception room, which is where they, after an abortion is completed, the remains are in a glass jar. They take that into what's called a POC room, and a medical assistant or another staff member has to count and make sure that all the parts were removed from a woman, so that no infection ensues, or, that there's not any issues. And if all the parts aren't there, they have to go back in and finish what they started. And so at this time, she had never actually assisted on an abortion procedure, but she decided that she wanted to help. And the doctor said, sure, you can come in and hold the ultrasound probe, because she had done that. And then, see what this is all about. So that's what she did. And that day, she literally watched a 13-week-old baby fight for its life and lose that fight. And that moment for her was an awakening. And she, began really questioning her whole life and everything that she had believed and the things that she had been telling women, and she wondered, how did I get to this place? I'm an educated woman. What happened? And, she just really, really condemned herself, and she didn't understand how she could ever come back from how far she had gone.
Right.
And thankfully, there were people who were willing to help her. And that was the Coalition for Life, the peaceful, prayerful witness that was on the sidewalk.
Right.
So she left her office and she went to theirs, and they were able to help her. And that was really the catalyst for starting this organization, was the help that she received. She realized, she and her husband decided that they wanted to help other people who were conflicted. Maybe they did go into this organization, any abortion facility or any abortion related work, that, most people start in that work because they have a desire to help. Nobody grows up wanting to work in an abortion clinic.
Right.
It's not something that you set out to do. It's the draw is helping women and helping people out of crisis situations.
Right.
So our hope is always that the same thing that's sitting them into the clinic will be what draws them out.
Right.
That once they see the harm and how abortion hurts women, just like it hurt me, and it hurts so many other women across this country, not only physically, but emotionally, financially, spiritually, mentally, socially. So many women walk in shame. And people who've worked in the industry, we have workers who reach out to us who haven't worked in the industry for 20 years. But even if it was a short amount of time, even if it was only 1 year that they worked at an abortion facility, it affected them for their lifetime.
Right. So even after 20 years, they're still going through traumatic.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that oftentimes when someone goes through trauma, just like I did, we find ways to either stuff it down and cope in other ways that aren't healthy. And so for many, many years, we don't even see the effects of the trauma on our own lives until we get sober, we get in therapy, we start to actually unpack, and we've got to take off all of the symptoms, the things that we've taken on to try to stuff it down. And, we don't know the effect. It's the same with women who've had abortions. We've got these studies that come out that say, we followed women for 5 years after their abortion, and none of them regret it, or 95% of them don't regret it. And that's just not true.
Right.
You really need to follow a woman for many years afterwards. And are you looking at all the factors in her life, that the substances she's using, the things that she's doing that actually cover up? It's the same with abortion workers. Many, many times, when they first come out, we're not trying to make pro-life speakers out of abortion workers. And so often when they first come out, they're not pro-life. They're very conflicted about what they've seen. And often it's the way that they were treated that sends them out. And we have to have many conversations. We have therapists on staff. So Abby is actually a licensed counselor. And then we also have another therapist named Amanda. And then we have one who is part-time named Peg. And they all work with our clients to uncover and unpack what the root of their issues are. But so often it's the way that they treated me is what sends them out,
Right.
the work conditions, that kind of thing. But an organization that doesn't treat its employees well is never going to treat the people who come into that facility well.
Well, it's like Abby didn't get a full understanding of what was going on in the abortion clinic until she was there helping, assisting the doctor. That's when
Right.
reality set in.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. And if you're someone who works at the front desk, oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
these workers think, well, I've never participated in an abortion.
Right. I just answered the phone.
Yeah, but you have, because abortion is their moneymaker.
Right.
And, people who answer the phone are taught to sell abortion.
Yeah.
And so they're taught to manipulate and do anything they can to get that woman in there for that procedure. Sad. It's very sad. I often liken it to a domestic violence relationship.
Yeah.
Or a soldier who's been at war with PTSD. So women who are in abusive relationships are brought in under the pretense that I'm going to take care of you.
Right.
I've got your best interest in mind.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to have to worry. You're going to be secure. Planned Parenthood does the same thing. When women are hired, or men, we have a few men clients, but for the most part, it's women. When they're hired not because it's an abortion clinic. No one comes in there thinking it's an abortion clinic.
Right.
They're hired. This is a women's health clinic. We're here to help women, just like they did with Abby. And they trick you. And even women who come in working at the front desk, oh, you're just going to be answering the phones, honey. Don't worry about it.
Right.
In a few months, they do a good job. They come back and they say, hey, how would you like to make a little bit more money? And they say, well, yeah, because they're already working these long hours trying to make up, and they say, well, we'll give you $1 more an hour if you come work in the POC room in the back. So they train them to work back there, and they've already indoctrinated them into it. Once they look at that POC, it's over. The products of conception, they're already desensitized, and they've become a part of the tribe, the cult, so to speak. And then by that time, even if you're convicted about it or you feel like you're compromising, you end up justifying it in some way because you're making more money than you could probably make anywhere else. Right. Many of our workers don't have the education to actually do the jobs that they're doing. And so then it becomes, well, where are you going to go? Right. What are you going to do? Who's going to hire you now? And those are the same things that an abuser or a trafficker would tell you.
Absolutely.
So it's very much like that, the mentality.
They make you feel like you need them.
Yes.
You won't make it without them.
Yes. And many of these workers suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
Because of that.
Does your organization have like just one centralized location? Because I'm sure you help people trying to come out of the Planned Parenthood clinics from across the United States.
Correct? We work remotely. So I'm based in Texas, in Houston. There's a few of us in Austin, in the Austin area. We have one client manager in Virginia. We have another one in Ohio. We have our intake manager is in Maryland. And then, so we're all over and we work remotely. Right. Thank God for Zoom. We're able to have, Zoom conference calls, and we get together. We do a staff retreats every year, and that's when we plan our calendar and our campaigns for the year and kind of but every Monday we do a Zoom staff call. And so, but yeah, we work remotely, and we work with clients from every state.
Right.
Yeah.
When was this organization started? What year?
Well, Abby and her husband started it, and it was 2012. And they really started it just themselves, wanting to help women who were in the same position that Abby was. Now, mind you, it took her a couple of years to come around.
Right.
Even though she left the facility, she wasn't sold on being pro-life. You know, there were a lot of things about the pro-life movement and that didn't appeal to her. And, you know, she couldn't see through all of that. And still to this day, you know, there are things that no matter what organization you're a part of or what party or movement, you know, there's going to be differences.
Sure.
And so we, just like we learn in recovery, you know, we decide to overlook the differences and try to find the similarities. And so there is one thing that we can unite over, and that is life and love. So it took her a couple of years, but in 2012, she and her husband started by just, you know, they said, hey, maybe we can help one worker a month.
Right.
And they helped 12 in 1 month.
That's what I was going to ask. How has it grown since the day they started?
So that was 2012. We're now in 2019, and we've helped 530 former abortion workers leave their jobs, find hope and healing in Christ, and transition into life-affirming employment.
Right.
Yeah, 530. And since the movie Unplanned came out, we've seen there's been hundreds of workers who've contacted or reached out, but only about 30 of them actually followed through. So about a third have followed through and actually quit. But those are still huge numbers, you know.
If they've reached out, it's like they're still undecided, but there's something there.
Yeah, oh yeah. And even like a woman who's pregnant and in crisis, you know, I spoke with a woman last week who someone was trying to force her to have an abortion, and she thought she needed all kinds of help. We just had a conversation in prayer, and the next day she sends me a message. She goes, you know what? All I needed was the confidence.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be okay now. And I think some of these workers, even though they may not reach back out to us, once they reached out and they heard that somebody is actually here for you, you know, sometimes all we need is a hand up.
Absolutely.
We just need somebody to say, you can do this. You're not alone. You know, you're not living in the dark. You're not the only one. There are people out there just like you who are willing to help you. So whenever you're ready, we're here.
Right. A lot of them don't want people to know because they're afraid of the backlash that they might receive.
Well, and we judge ourselves so harshly. Yes. You know, we judge ourselves on our intentions, and we judge others on their actions. You know, the issue is we do know our intentions, and oftentimes we can be, especially when we're hurt, we tend to be pretty selfish, you know. And so we're looking at how we judge people, and we think that's how everybody else is judging us, you know.
Absolutely.
So, but
we are our worst critics.
we are, yes.
Absolutely. Yes. Unplanned, is it on DVD right now?
Yes, it is. So you can purchase it in Walmart, Target, you know, all of the regular department stores. You can also purchase it on Amazon. You can stream it on Amazon and iTunes. It is not available on Hulu, Netflix, those streaming products. But you can also order it. If you order it from our website, you'll get a signed copy. And so our website is prolove.com, and you would go up under the store, and we've got all kinds of products on there that are billboards, kind of t-shirts and hats and all kinds of stuff that help to spread the message that we are available to help those who work in the abortion industry.
Right. That's awesome. Pamela, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, you're welcome. There are a couple of other projects that I would like to share with your listeners, if that's okay. And again, if you go to our website, you'll see a lot, but our Facebook page has a lot more too.
Okay.
But we've got a couple of projects that some of your listeners may be interested in. One is the Pro-Life Women's Conference. So we host that conference every year, and I'm one of the coordinators for it. So it's prolifewomen.com. Okay. It's held the third week of June every year. And this year it's going to be in Indianapolis. We also have another project called Check My Clinic. Check My Clinic is a comprehensive database of inspection reports for abortion facilities from around the country. Okay. So If anyone wants to check out, maybe you're not someone who's pro-life, maybe you're questioning, but we can all agree that we want women to be safe.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So, and we all admit that this procedure is legal. So women actually do have a legal right to make this decision, but we want women to be safe. And so
Right.
our hope is that women would check out that site and just decide for themselves once they see those reports whether or not that's a facility they want to enter. So that's checkmyclinic.org. And then we also have, my goodness, Pro-Life Women's Conference, Check My Clinic. I think that's it right now. I can't think of anything else. But we've got a lot going on. We will be at the March for Life in January. That's in DC. And then we will be at the Sidewalk Advocates for Life Conference in October. And then one of our former workers is speaking at the Rehumanize International Conference in New Orleans. And September 26th, we have a webcast. That was the other thing I needed to tell you.
Okay.
It's absolutely free, and it's at 6 p.m. So if you go to our Facebook page, and then There Were None Pro-Life Outreach, you'll see the link for that. And
Okay.
the website for that is thewallsarestilltalking.com.
Very good.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Pamela.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely, me too.
All right. God bless you.
God bless you too. Please support our sponsor, renovationtea.com. You'll find a large variety from daily to specific herbal remedy teas, all certified organic and fair trade. Use code SHATTERED and you'll get a 10% discount. You can see the link below. Hi, I'm Dee. I'm the host of the Shattered Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell on the notifications so you won't miss an episode. I'm very passionate about helping families. If you are an expert that would like to help or would like to share your testimony, please contact me. Thank you.